First of all, good evening. Welcome to St. Mary's College School of Economic and Business Administration's Executive Speaker Series. I want to recognize a few special guests coming here. Mike Fox, CEO of Google in Silicon Valley. He is also on our school's advisory board. Patricia Schultz, are you here yet? Not quite yet. She's rushing that. No, she's on a telephone conference, and she's a board of director with Hitachi, and she was a CEO for a number of companies in the Silicon Valley. If I miss anybody on my advisory board, my apology. The Executive Speaker Series provides an invaluable platform for CEOs and presidents of corporations or organizations to have ongoing dialogue with our students, alumni, faculty, and community members on cutting-edge issues that are challenging our conventional thinking, our conventional way of doing things. That's what the Executive Speaker Series is about. And last series, we have Dr. Jeffrey Moore, a good friend of Dr. Chen, speak for us, and we're so fortunate to have Dr. Chen today to speak with us. In the last number of years, we have heard the words of cloud computing, social media, smart devices. We heard about cloud computing is the way to go in the future. We heard the smart devices have transformed the way people receive, disseminate information. We have heard that social media is one of the ways, important ways, for us to engage and reach out our prospect customers, and among many other implications. However, how will cloud computing affect organizational design? How will smart devices transform the way employees get their work done at the corporations? How would social media and socialization affect employees' performance and organizational culture? These are critical questions that business students, faculty need to understand, so they can lead organizations toward the right directions and make the right decisions. Today is a great honor to have Dr. Pehong Chen, one of the most influential and knowledgeable persons in the Silicon Valley, to discuss these important questions with us. Dr. Pehong Chen is the chairman, president, and CEO of BroadVision, a NASDAQ company, and with offices and operation in more than 20 cities around the world. And BroadVision is innovative and leading suppliers of online commerce and business social networking solutions. And Dr. Chen is also a member of the board of directors for Sina. If any of you are familiar with the Chinese market, Sina is the #1 internet portal in China. So Dr. Chen is a board member for that company. He's also currently a vice chairman of the Committee 100. For people in Silicon Valley and around the world, you know that's a very influential and prominent nonpartisan organization that designed to improve mutual understanding between U.S. and China through dialogue and cooperation. Prior to establishing BroadVision, Dr. Chen was vice president of Sybase and founder and president of Gain Technology, which were acquired in 1992 by Sybase for over $100 million. Dr. Chen received his PhD from Berkeley. At least I can say I had the honor affiliated with Berkeley. I taught at Haas, so I think there's a connection there, Dr. Chen. He received his Master of Science from Indiana University and bachelor degree from National University, Taiwan. He's also a graduate of Stanford University's Executive Program in Business and Management. And ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome our featured speaker of tonight, Dr. Chen.
Hello? So anyway, I was just saying that I spent 5 windowless years at Berkeley doing my dissertation, and what a world it is when I came out in Silicon Valley. All my life I've been an entrepreneur since almost the day I graduated, and to be able to witness several big changes, which is really kind of the first thing I want to talk about today, the notion of change. Whoops, sorry about this formatting. Don't know what happened here. Certainly not Chang Yi. Anyway, so there are really very few things in life that doesn't change, and I think change itself is really one of them. And if you really think about the world we're in, especially here in Silicon Valley, the change is really kind of the norm, just put it mildly. I mean, who would have thought today that Oracle is also a hardware company? And in contrast, HP is trying to become a software company. Think about that for a minute, okay? Just a few years ago, this is really would have been totally unimaginable. So what does that really mean in terms of the topic of today, the whole notion of social? So I like to do it the David Letterman way. I always try to do that. I forgot actually to bring my index cards. I'm going to throw it at you. So just imagine I got these virtual index cards I'm going to throw. So, but instead of telling you the top 10 answers, I'm going to post it as top 10 questions. So it's a little bit like Jeopardy as well. So think of this as a combination of the David Letterman and Jeopardy. Okay, so 10 questions. First is, let's really kind of do a reset and try to understand what the social media really is. What does that mean? Second, surely, especially in the last couple of weeks, a reflection of the big change that's happened to all of our lives, digital life, I something to I everything. And then I want to switch topic a little bit, talking about what is it about a bank, about the meaning of money, and use that to lead us to the real question we want to answer, which is information. And from there, we want to go into knowledge. What does money correlate to information, and how does information correlate to knowledge? And I'm particularly interested in this topic because I actually did my dissertation in knowledge management. So for the last 30 years, 20 plus years, that's been my biggest sort of lifetime passion, my own work. But all of us are probably fairly familiar with the notion of social media, if not ourselves directly, certainly through our kids. But what does that mean when we apply that to business? So from social media, number 6, we want to breach into the context of business, enterprise social. Then, as the dean said, how does it all come together vis-a-vis so-called cloud? And you probably also heard a lot about this thing called 2.0. Some people argue it's now 3.0, 5.0, 10.0, who knows? Okay. But for the purpose of discussion, let's just do a binary. Everything from the past is 1.0. Everything that we're facing right now new, let's just call it 2.0. Let's not be too carried away with all these version numbers. But probably more importantly is this notion of a new set of KPIs, which we call the reputation economy. There's actually a lot of parallels in the consumer world. How many of you are familiar with the concept called clout, spelled K-L-O-U-T? Okay, not cloud, but clout. Okay, so there's this notion of reputation. How much influence do you have as a consumer? How many people listen to you or follow you? In business, the same way. We feel that it is really important. One of us, we did some product in HR as well. One of the holy grail in HR has always been, how do we know about employees that they never tell us? Okay, And that's a very important KPI in my opinion, the new KPI that we add to our arsenal of KPIs. And where are the use cases? How do we use this new philosophy or new strategy in our business? And finally, conclude by saying why it's such a big deal, somewhat rhetorically, because I feel, and most people feel, it's a big deal. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about it. Okay, so let's start with number 1. So let me just throw the first card to you. Okay, so what is the social media thing? Obviously, you all know now what are the big issues around the world. It's either China or social or sort of irrelevant. The Facebook by itself is already the world's 3rd most populous nation. In fact, you all probably know that Facebook is banned in China, like many other popular internet services in China. Many of which reasons are related to China's very, very strong censorship requirements. But in this case, my personal opinion is that it has nothing to do with censorship. It all has to do with the pride of the Chinese government. Because if they had let Facebook be open in China, then Facebook would have already surpassed China, the world's largest nation. Okay, and that to the Chinese would be a big hit on their national pride. So the Facebook generation is upon us. A few years ago, my wife and I suddenly realized that when we send email to our kids, which what she and I grew up doing in business, of course, in the 80s, that's our number 1 way of communicating. Our kids never respond. You have to send them either short text messages or post it on their Facebook wall. You get instantaneous response if you use those 2 mechanisms. So we begin to want, and which really drives my wife mad. How can you, because we then grill them on that. How can you not respond to an email? And honestly, they feel like they have no real responsibility to respond to an email. If you post it in this other media, they feel that's how they kind of have grown up with, and that's the way they will respond or communicate with you. So already you see kind of a very, very big difference in that. And I think Jeffrey Moore always uses this very good example in that when we grow up in classes, we kind of face the teacher like this. Okay, we use desks in front of us. Our kids actually grow up facing each other in tables. Okay, groups of 5 and 6 working together. So for us, working together towards some sort of a test or answer is called cheating. For our kids, it's called collaboration. Okay, so they grow up much more social, all the way starting from learning in school to certainly in business. So the upshot of that, obviously, is that it's no longer this macro or mass media that's dominating our life, right? The implication of social media is so profound. It's very hard to kind of just brush it away in 1 or 2 cases or examples. It's extremely pervasive if you think about it. Now already, of course, changes happening since the 80s. Since Ted Turner came out and say, I want to give you a channel that plays nothing but news all day long, or sport, ESPN, so on. That's already fairly revolutionary. I remember when this happened, and I was traveling so much, everywhere I go to any foreign country, I really feel like home when I open up the TV and can see CNN. But what it's given us choice, right? 500 channels now. You can, basically get to the kind of content that really fits you. But nothing, the 500 cable channels compare to what we're getting today. The implication or the impact here is such, I said so profound and so instantaneous, and it can spread so fast, right? The most secretive, probably the most important and secretive operation in the U.S. military history, within 5 minutes, some guy raise his head and see these helicopters flying over his house. The whole world knows about it within 5 minutes. Okay, within 5 minutes. And that's really kind of the power of social media. Many people credit what's happening this year in the Arab world to also the same sort of new environment, where the ability to know is unsurpassed in the past in many, many parts of the world. Same thing with China, where things are much more controlled and censored, where in this case, in a very positive way, within days of the crisis, through microblogging primarily, their versions of Twitter, the leader, of course, is my company, Sina, that I've been on the board for the last 12 years, that really has helped the government formulate, getting all the necessary right information, which would have been really difficult to get in a country where infrastructure isn't that good. They have 100,000 workers in Libya. And Chinese government was able to organize and get all of them out with a very short period of time to international acclaim. Really, really very well done in a very difficult operation, which China never needed to do before. Okay? China is not like the U.S., very, very, very good at this kind of international operations. So most people credit this to just the availability and the immediacy of information through basically, just people on the ground there telling everyone the situation and what needs to be done. So first touch of reputation economy is just your popularity. If the president of Taiwan this spring reached 500,000 followers on Facebook, but not to be outdone by that, the Beijing PD actually at the same time reached 1 million followers. Okay, and I don't know why people will be following the police department, but we're very happy for that because it's on Sina, and it's a pretty amazing story. Sina microblog, the equivalent of Twitter, in a span of 3 years, it was launched this time in 2008. This year, 3 years later, we're going to reach, I think, north of 300 million active users. Okay. So it's a really, really unbelievable sort of new form of media. So as you can tell, social media already has had and will increasingly have, A, this is a new form of media, and B, having some very wholesale, sort of profound impact and transformational effect on societies, politics, how people share information, and frankly, live their life. Okay, so let's then talk about another very, very big thing that's happening. Frankly, not very long ago, just in the last few years, that we've turned from I nothing to I something to I everything, and all the way to being a parent like me, I paid. And my son Nelson is one of these people. Anything that Apple produces, he would stand in line the night before, just so that he can become the first to get it. I don't get it, but there are people like that out there. They say that for a brand to be so strong, that your customers really have a love about it, not just respect. It's really kind of an ultimate form of brand equity. So there certainly has been a lot of discussions, everywhere on blogs and TV, and the new biography just came out, and all that. But obviously, Steve Jobs has got probably the most productive years, in the last 7 years since he actually was diagnosed and operated on his cancer. I would say very few people in history in such a short period of time would have such profound impact. And I will even throw in like Alexander the Great, the historical figures into the same picture, that one person can have such profound impact in such a short period of time. And in one fell swoop, he's rendered many, many industries, either irrelevant or in deep, kind of tailspin. I mean, think about this. PC, never the same after what he's done. Consumer electronics, of course, one chart on Wall Street Journal tells the whole story, looking at the last 10 years of the stock performance of Apple versus Sony. Remember Sony? Those of grew up in the 80s. Sony was the thing. I remember I wanted so much for a Walkman in college. I just couldn't afford it. Couldn't afford it. Okay, and that was the iPhone of the day. You know. Unfortunately, not anymore. Even though Sony is our great customer, but you know, there's a lot of reasons behind what we see today. Obviously, we know about Nokia, Motorola, you know, the telephone companies. Who can imagine somebody can go to the big telco and tell them, this is the deal, you do it my way, okay? Unimaginable before. Publishing, entertainment, and the list goes on and on. Pretty amazing. Another big debate has been between these two guys. I don't know either of them, of course, know of them, certainly been a big fan, read all their books and stuff like that. They are actually same age, and many people will kind of be arguing who is greater or having bigger impact on our life and so on. And a lot of people even raise the question that, you know, they are really not innovators. And many even say they are imitators. I think people who are saying that are kind of missing the point. I mean, in technology, innovation is not about invention. Okay? Innovation in technology is continuous improvement. And that's what innovation is all about. And if you really look at both of them, they are great innovators in my view. I mean, take Bill first. I think Bill Gates, or the whole thing behind the Microsoft culture, is a company that never gives up. Okay, they may not do it right the first time, but boy, do they try again. So 10 years later, they get it right. Okay, but since they are so powerful, it's such a big monopoly, they can afford that, you know, investment and time, and eventually they win. Okay. But Steve Jobs is a little bit different. Steve Jobs is the consummate perfectionist. Okay, nothing gets out of Apple. I mean, who can do something that comes out without a manual? Right? That the thing basically explains itself, that requires no explanation. And that's, I think, the ultimate user experience. Those of us building products, whether it's hardware, software, you will find that to be really, really hard. Especially in a very competitive market. Everybody under the gun, under pressure to ship it. So to be so obsessed, and in fact be so successful about getting this right, because it's not just them, they have the whole supply chain. They do everything OEM, ODM. So their partners have to do it their way to get this thing right. The things come in such perfect shape. From the packaging, in the inside, opening up, the whole experience. Okay? So surely they're not the first to invent MP3 player, not the first company to build smartphones, definitely not the company that invented tablet. So it's not about invention. It's about continuous improvement to perfection. That's what I think he has shown us. He has written the final Bible about how to do things right in technology. Okay, so changing subject. I want to talk about the bank a little bit. Okay, hasn't been the most popular topic in the last couple of years, of course. What about the banks? Why do we put our money in the bank? To me, there are three main reasons. Number one, it's safer. Safer certainly than putting under your mattress, of course. Okay. Second, it's more convenient. So that everywhere you go, you can use your debit card, credit card, or ATM or whatnot. You don't have to drag a whole big bag of cash if you're going to Europe for a couple of weeks. Okay. And last but not least, probably most importantly, is the value that it creates. See, when you deposit your money in the bank therefore can do this pooling of interest and be able to move that money through this flow, loan it to someone else that needed the capital or cash, right? And thereby creating this flow and therefore generating value for everyone. Of course, when it's over leveraged as it was in the last couple of years, then it can become a huge, huge problem. But in general, When you put money in the bank, it creates flow, it generates value, and which is why we get paid with the interest and things like that. So let's kind of hold that thought for a minute, because we're going to come back to that as it relates to information and knowledge. So let's first talk about information, and then we'll talk about knowledge. So who will you trust if you kind of do the extrapolation from bank money to information? So I look at, this is done yesterday, so this is number, I hope it's accurate as of Friday of last week. I compare the world top 5 banks to the world top 5, I call information providers. Okay, so therefore in this right-hand column, I don't include people that are really not information business, but big tech companies like IBM, Cisco, or HP, or people like that. But I only included those that are holding some form of our information, personal information. So on the left-hand side, we got ICBC, China's largest bank right now, about $200 billion of market cap. Second is CCB, China Construction Bank, and then HSBC, the Shanghai, Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank. This is the British bank, and then 2 American banks, Wells and Chase. So first thing we notice is that out of the top 5 banks now, 2 of them, number 2, 1 and 2 in fact, are Chinese. This would rarely be the case, say 10 years ago, not even probably even 5 years ago. So this is clearly a reflection of the ascent of China's economic power. Goes without saying. Second interesting is look at right-hand side, the top 5 information banks. Combined market cap is approaching almost $1 trillion. Okay. And in fact, 25% higher than the top 5 money banks. What does that tell us? It tells us that people actually put more value now into where information is than it is where money is, isn't it? Okay. But also another interesting thing is none of them, the top 5, actually are Chinese. Okay? So we pose the question, would there be any Chinese companies here in 5 to 10? Would there ever be? All right? And that's a question that's really worth thinking about. In a closed, much closer society, would there ever be a world dominant information player as we see? In fact, China has some very large already players, not as large as these, but like Tencent, okay, the largest social network in China company. They make almost all their money in online social gaming. Very, very rich company. Generates probably $250 million of profit a quarter. Okay. Their market cap probably about 50, 60 billion dollars. So they're not quite there yet. And they're also only China, not like these guys, that's global. So I'm going to conduct an informal, unscientific poll right now on you. Okay? So, first, do you generally trust your bank? Despite what happened in the crisis of 2008? Come on. 'Cause otherwise, how can, I mean, you don't put it under your mattress, do you? Right? All right, so generally it's okay. What about your information, your personal information? Let me give you an example why there's some value add. Remember I talked about the flow? So basically the idea here is if I entrust my information to some informational bank, they can add value to that, creating more flow, creating more value for me. After all, it's me that's important in getting value back. So here's an example. You know, we all use cell phones and all that. How many of you actually go and kind of figure out, is your plan the most efficient or most cost-effective plan? You probably don't have that kind of time. If to get on the phone is already, you know, kind of, you can't get me to get on the phone with a phone company with a 10-foot pole. I just simply would not do that, okay? Too painful, too much time. So what if we say, I will allow you to analyze my phone bill. It's my personal information. And you can come back, know about the program and say, you know, you're kind of overpaying. You should really be going using this plan. That's a value add. Phone company is not going to do that for you, of course. Okay. Why would they? So if someone like this can do that for us, well, we would kind of like our money creating interest for us to flow, right? So think about that for a minute, whether you agree or not. And there are probably millions of examples like that for your personal information. Okay, so here's the question. Would you trust one of these companies to be your beholder of your personal information? Okay, assuming they act like a bank, treat everything confidentially, securely, conveniently, blah, blah, blah. All right, who would go with Apple? I said about 7 or 8 votes, less than 10. How about Uncle Bill, Microsoft? Only, oh, okay, great. Gotta take that. All right, only one. Huh. How about Google, the big G? About, sort of half, hands. I count all of you 1 vote. Okay, 5. Amazon? About 10 also. Facebook? 0. Wow, that's amazing. Okay. I mean, first of all, you need to have an account with them, of course. I mean, I think I got, yeah, I have Apple. No. I have a Sky account. We use Skype all day long. So it's Microsoft, Google, sure, Gmail, Amazon, of course. I buy all my stuff on Amazon, and Facebook, just so that my son will answer our message. That's a very interesting question, isn't it? Okay, do you really trust somebody to be the beholder of your personal information? I sense that. I think 80% of you actually did not vote. Okay, so you don't trust anybody. All right. So this is, so far it's all about consumer. What about business? Okay. So here's an important question. Why do people, what is such a 600-700 million people all on Facebook? And if you ask psychologists or sociologists, uniformly they will tell you that there is an element of we as human beings being the social animal, is this whole notion about happiness is firmly anchored on some sort of harmonious relationship that we maintain, the bonding with everyone around us. Okay, that I'm not a social scientist, but I've read enough to tell you that most people kind of believe that's the reason behind it. Again, so therefore, if you extrapolate this to business, you'll find that there are a lot of parallels. Okay, happiness equivalent with success, and if you have a very clear vision with a bunch of very clear objectives, you tend to be able to, and then you maintain a very productive business relationship with your colleagues, or customers, partners. You tend to be able to reach the same type of result or happiness. But there's a very interesting question though, which is, if we poll our employees and say, tell me how many connections or how many friends do you have on consumer social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or even Farmville. God hope my employees are not playing Farmville at work. We get some sort of answers, of course. And I can guarantee you that number is a lot higher than if you ask them. But what if, do you have any relation at all? No, in the same level of sort of closeness and relationship, strong relationship with your colleagues or with your customer and partner in business. After all, these are the people that's helping you getting your job done or getting our bills paid. And so unfortunately, the answer typically is no. So you got to say why. If we can derive the same kind of value through a business relationship, how come? Why not? Okay, so let's park that thought for a minute. Then we want to talk about cloud. Cloud is probably the oldest concept in IT. When I first started learning computer science, the thing was called time sharing. Mainframe computer in the 70s for a totally different reason, because of the scarcity of compute power, the CPUs. These days, cloud is something obviously several generations later, completely different. But the concept is as old as computer itself. Okay, we at high tech, we are best at is to basically get the same old concept, create a new name for it, and then basically make the best out of it. Okay, and that's known as marketing, of course. So what is cloud anyway? So from the good old days with mainframes, when I first arrived in the US, 1981 was the dawn of beginning of PC. Boy, was it an exciting time. Okay, because before that, I've never even seen a computer. It's all sitting in the data center. I would use punch cards for that, and I had to actually look up at Wikipedia and show the picture to my son because he doesn't believe there's such a thing called the punch cards. So coming to here was the first time I saw the Mac, the PC and all that. And then of course, Apple more than anything has proved to us that cloud is a real business. That in cloud, through cloud, that one can reach, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people. Same with Facebook and everything else like that. In terms of distribution, in terms of starting companies, you want to start a software company, used to be the biggest cost, biggest hurdle and challenge is access to market, is distribution. Okay. But now with this type of stuff, all of a sudden, the whole equation shifted and changed dramatically. Okay. And we'll talk about that in a minute also. But with this being the new paradigm, then we kind of try to correlate that with what's going on in the world, right? When Tom Friedman said the world is flat, 2006, most people are still saying, what do you mean by that? But today, very few companies in the world can be there by themselves. You have to be part of the whole ecosystem around the world, whether it's outsourcing, OEM, ODM, supply chain, so on and so forth. You focus on your core competencies and let your partners do the rest for you. Right? Apple focuses on design and sales. They have no factories in the world at all. Everything is done through their OEM, ODM partners in China, for example. So whether it's globalization, knowledge. Now, one thing that we learned from Google is that even though we can find all the stuff, but how good is it when it has hundreds of pages coming out of your search? Okay, this noise to signal to noise ratios become really, really unbearable and problematic. And finally, it's the speed of innovation. Okay, if you don't innovate or then die, I mean, this cannot be more true in today's environment. So with that as the backdrop, then we realize that when you think about cloud computing, it really means three things. It means a virtualized world where resources can be available to everybody. If you have a peak time at Christmas, you can use 1,000 CPUs. But when it's not peak time, non-peak time, maybe you only use 100 CPUs. Okay, was not possible just a few years ago. So that's about virtualization. And when you have cloud, you need to lend. And lending is no longer limited to your desktop. Lending now can be anywhere. Okay, can be on all the smart devices that Dean was talking about. Here, iPad, all kinds of different devices. But finally, to connect what's in the sky and what's on the ground, you need another strategy. And that strategy, I believe, is socialization. Is let people connect to each other and let them connect to their work. And with that, then, we have a completely new paradigm of working together. No longer do you always have to be at the office. Hoteling will become more of the norm than the exception, etc., etc. Okay? So when we think about designing the future of the organization, of a true green world, energy, green sort of economy, we need to start thinking. In fact, one of our partners is in Korea, Korea Telecom, and their name for this project is called Smart Working. Okay? Because they believe that the way for so crowded a country to work together better, more productive, and to save a lot of their carbon footprint is to really find new ways to work, for business to work like this, over the cloud, and be mobile, and be social. So talking about this 1 versus 2, let's first clarify a few things. First is this alphabet soup. Okay, like I just mentioned, that we in high tech best is to throw a lot of buzzwords at you, all the 3-letter, 5-letter words. So a lot of people call this Enterprise 2.0. Some call it Enterprise Social Networking, Business Social Networking, Business Cloud, Social Business Cloud, Platform Engagement, really championed by Jeffrey Moore, many other experts. For the purpose of our discussion, they all mean the same thing. Okay, so no, variation is not too important here. So between the 1.0 and 2.0, we all probably largely came from the 1.0 world. What is the 1.0 world? 1.0 world is mostly around record, around data, around static and fixed processes of running our business, whether it's finance and ERP or even CRM with our customers. And we tend to really be guarding against, kind of like everybody's a bad guy, right, in our organization. Unless I let you know, you will not know. That's kind of our mantra in running the business. Okay, remember that. Everybody's a bad guy unless I tell you you are good. Or need to know. Unless I think you need to know, you won't know. Because why? Because knowledge is king. So whoever holds the knowledge has the biggest power. In the new world, though, it's completely different. Okay? It's no longer about pushing stuff around. It's about pooling. It's about letting people participate, even serendipitously. Okay? Even if you don't know somebody knows it, maybe they can help you the most. Okay? The whole notion of serendipity is the ultimate form of knowledge, in my opinion. And therefore, it's really not just about record anymore. It's truly about people. Let people participate, be connected, and help each other, and share. Okay? So it's need to share as the default. Everybody's a good guy, right? And it's a many-to-many mesh, or this fabric of connectivity. Much like we see our kids do on Facebook. But they are connected often even to a lot of strangers. Doesn't it make more sense, at least for all of us working in a work environment, business environment, to at least be connected with the people we know so that we can do more work together, better work together? That would then therefore create this knowledge flow, similar to the money flow that we talked about earlier. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to create a very important effect known as the N-squared effect, the so-called network effect. This is a famous law called the Metcalfe's law. And we're all familiar with the Moore's law. That's really defined 1.0. In this next generation, it will be the Metcalfe's law, founder of 3Com. But what is N-squared effect? Meaning the number of nodes is N in a network, and the ultimate effect or output or success of that is actually the square of the number of nodes in that network. That's already realized, in fact, in internet, given all these routers and all the nodes. It hasn't been realized in knowledge management, in how people work. And that's what we are endeavoring to achieve. So I actually analyzed how we use email. We find that at least half of our email inbox actually is in collaboration. So we've been trying to use this linear, very old-fashioned tool to simulate actually multi-party work. The other 1/3 is actually all the assignment, okay, telling people what to do or being told what to do. Only about 20% or less than that is probably where it belongs to email as a notification. So what we want to do is to shift you to these social networks, places in the cloud, that we can all do our work at the same place, rather than in email where we just chase and chase and chase. I mean, we probably all have that same feeling, right? I don't know whether I should answer this or not, because I don't know if someone else has answered, or maybe I shouldn't answer because it would be deemed as kind of stupid. We all kind of have that kind of feeling. Wouldn't it be better and easier just to post everything up there that we can share, and we can see immediately what everybody's saying, and therefore, often, assuming it's much, much more open, that we can generate even more fusion from others that can contribute to that. The other part is to really make it more of a shared view, but really can be much easier to follow as these people-centric tasks or workflow, as opposed to, again, chasing within these threads. As a result, then we can achieve true sort of anywhere, anytime, any one type of collaboration. So coming to the end now, talk about this cloud, notion of cloud, K-L-O-U-T, in business. We call that the reputation economy. Because in an organization, if you can connect all the people into these shared spaces and the work in the form of content that they share, they work with, then you can establish this new KPI we call CAP, which stands for connectivity, activity, and popularity. So what does that mean? Connectivity simply means how many people and how many things are you connected to or following. Activity means what exactly are you doing or contributing. And popularity simply means this feedback loop, positive feedback loop that you're giving to others in terms of your comment, ratings, or different forms of sort of giving back. Now, if you can really establish that as a new KPI, then something very interesting will happen. Because I'm the CEO. I used to really having a hard time knowing what everybody's doing unless somehow it's exposed to me. Not anymore. When I go to my Clairville in the morning, which is kind of my true dashboard now, I'm kind of driving a helicopter. I hover around everywhere, all the different communities or parts of our world. And I can tell you very clearly who's going to resign within a month. Why? Because I don't hear from him anymore. Okay? Or so-and-so is telling me this account is really hot, it will close, whether it will really close or not. Why? Because if I go to that community, I can see the activity level. And our auditors, our CFO loves this, because nobody can fool anybody anymore. It is unbelievable that one simple notion of called transparency can kill so many ills. You know? And that's a social network, what is done right can truly provide for your business. With this one simple concept called sharing and transparency. And with that, then, we can create, sorry. So it's because I was talking too long. So we can create this notion of heat map. We can know where we are today, where we want to be tomorrow. Am I doing the right thing? Where's the true KPI in its totality? How does this group compare to that group? How does my company compare to another company? A lot of interesting things will arise from this reputational economy. After all, what is an economy? I mean, the Dean can probably explain that better than I do. But what it is to me, is just the flow of things, right? When goods and services are changing hands, when information and knowledge are moving around, that creates the right economy. And you need the right incentive behind that, and that's the reputation. In fact, let me tell you, the number 4 highest ranking in reputation in our company, and you won't guess this, I know you won't guess it right, is actually our GC, is our general counsel. And I was shocked also that the legal department will be one of the biggest adopters and beneficiaries of an open network like this. You would have thought that they would be totally paranoid with this. Okay, not so. They find this to be extremely valuable for them to be supporting our field in terms of all these contracts, negotiations, deals, discussions, and so on and so forth. So, now that we've been on this mission for a while, we now have developed a methodology that we believe that if you are able to get 100 people to at least give this a shot, to march in the same direction, probably no more than an hour of your time a day, then you'll be able to learn how to do this as a team. The team together. And you'll be able to completely transform your company from almost 100% doing it the old-fashioned 1.0 way to probably a good 80-20 mixture within 6 months, with the key inflection point right about the 3 months mark, when hopefully you can set a goal and become 50-50. And that's the key, okay, for this adoption. to succeed. Which is really the goal, to be able to minimize the time that it would take for us to all work like this. Okay? Believe me, I believe that the issue really isn't a technology challenge, rather it's a behavioral challenge. It's really, really hard to get a group of people to change how they work. We even ourselves, after 3 years, still have to constantly remind each other, could you not send me that email anymore? Could you put it in, we call Clearville it, so that we can share rather than being private about it and things like that. So the transformation actually is fairly straightforward. We need a mandate. The head of the organization should say, I really care about this. I care about creating a new productivity coefficient. I care about creating this network n-squared effect. And then from there, we organize a bunch of people, probably 10, 20 people, to be committed to publishing, sort of getting us a warm start instead of the cold start, and creating different use cases and communities. Then after a month, we can then drive participation from everyone, the rest of the 100 people, let's say. And then we actually run a competition. I think competition, instead of wasting time on Farmville and things like that, we actually now drive a lot of fun games now, but true learning games within the enterprise social games. Actually, it's the ultimate form of learning in my experience now. And we've done that a lot in our own company and with our customers. So that the employees self-organize. How many of you know the game called WoW? Or your kids probably know. World of Warcraft? Okay, that's the ultimate social game, extremely challenging. You are to organize into guilds, and your goal is to go and slay these dragons, okay, and monsters. Very difficult. And they also provide business in BI. Afterwards, you can analyze your performance and fire the people in your guild that you think not doing their job, didn't shoot the dragon when that had the chance, and things like that. I believe the same strategy actually works really, really well in the company. We now can organize these games. We do it every 6 months. Employees self-organize what is it they want to do, and we pick a topic in learning, and the whole company go and do that. Winner typically is an iPad 2, okay, or $10,000, things like that. We do give out some pretty handsome incentives, but it's really, really fun. You see, we have some basic criteria. For example, it has to go across our country boundaries for the team members. Current managers cannot be the leader of the guild, and things like that. But from that, I find personally that this type of learning is 100 times more effective than sending people to classes. Okay, sending people to classes is either boondoggle or they fall asleep anyway. Okay, very ineffective in terms of that form of learning. This is a very self-motivated learning, and also more effective learning is learning from peers. Okay, and so we run this extremely, very, very, and so we kind of incorporate that into our adoption process as well. So as a result, I believe the flow would then happen all the way from unknown to need to know to need to share, all the way to this notion of serendipity. Therefore, from there, raw data can become useful information. Information can flow to become true knowledge, and then, of course, ultimately become wisdom in our strategy. Okay, so use cases. I don't believe you need any use cases. Because when we learned to use email in the 80s, we never said, oh, by the way, email can only be used for legal department and not for engineering or anything like that. It's a form of communication. We will invent use cases all day long. Okay, so like I said, we've seen lots and lots of use cases invented by all our employees. I mean, we have about 300 members in our network right now, and we got 500 or 600 communities, each corresponding to a project or a group of organization, and they're all created by the employees themselves. We also have 1,000 networks in addition to that, each corresponding to one or more customers that we'll work with. Okay, so think of this really as another form of email, but it's your good old email maybe times 10 in terms of the dimensions or things that you can do with it. Personally, I gave a a great use case is that, talking about Sony earlier, that they had a hot case a few months about in the summer, in July, that bubbled up in Japan. So our team in Japan in the past would have to send an email to our support. And God knows how long it will take eventually to reach me, and I'll then have to assess the situation. I would say at least several days, if not several weeks. But in this case, our guy in Japan on the ground raised the issue and posted that into our network. 18 hours later, I wake up in the West Coast. So think about it. This kind of followed the sun all the way from Japan, Asia, Europe, East Coast, all the way to me. 18 hours later, I wake up, 26 posts. Many of these posts didn't even come from our support staff. They come from these serendipitous knowledge, from a lot of other people simply following or having an interest in this. They contribute a lot of ideas and suggestions. So I was able to sit there and assess the entire situation. Immediately I can make my decision. I send it back. I said, Minami-san, here's our decision. Go tell them, do it this way, that way, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So 2 weeks later, I was in Tokyo. I met with their CIO, and he couldn't wait to tell me. He said, Dr. Chen, I'm so impressed with your support. Okay. No company supports us like that so quickly. And I said, you really make my day, and I really appreciate that. But here's why we can be responding to you so fast. So remember about this velocity, this innovation. It's very hard to quantify or put it in a fixed process. It really requires this kind of fusion and the flow to get things done quickly. And you really need this kind of organization that's very virtual to be able to do it right. Okay, so final question. Why is it such a big deal? Because it is. So let me recap, right? So we get people to self-organize and connect to each other to the things that they care about or project they work on in all these different shared spaces. We certainly can guard against those that shouldn't be exposed or open. But by default, most things are open. I would say probably 80-20 or 90-10 in favor of being more open. Second, then you will see knowledge begins to flow and can accelerate. And then you establish your reputation so that people care. There's some reward for being active and sharing and participatory. In our case, if you reach the goal that we set for your reputation, you actually get paid 10 to 15% more in your MBO. So we try, it's a stick. It's not a stick, it's a carrot. We try to encourage you to really do more, okay? Rather than just punching your time card and go home. Because why? Because whatever you put in, you actually get multiples back. Okay? And finally, as a result, you can then have endless use cases in terms of this style of communicating and collaboration. I've been in IT for 25 years. I've not seen an ROI metric that's so easy to explain and quantify. Why? Because 1 is less than n, and n is far less than n squared. Okay? When n is greater than 2. We learned that in third grade math. And in most organizations, n is definitely greater than 2. Right? So if you can establish an organization, both inside and outside, among all the colleagues, and with your customer partner who work like this, trust me, you will say, why haven't I done this quickly? Or why haven't I done this earlier? With that, I want to thank you for this opportunity. Okay, first question is about data security, probably privacy, all the related issues. Enron, blah, blah, blah. In terms of security, there is certainly a perception that things are less safe in the cloud than it is within your firewalls of your own data center. Okay. Now, I can certainly understand that in many cases. I mean, we talked about healthcare earlier. There's a lot, very strong regulations around HIPAA and patient records and things like that. So, depending on the type of stuff that we're talking about, there's various degree of sensitivity about that. But by and large, in general, personally, cloud or no cloud, first, I certainly trust cloud better than my own data center. Why? Because almost all the cloud services that can sort of be out there are all very, very strong in terms of 24/7. It really is run like a bank vault, better than my own data center. Okay. So for instance, our data center in our building often will have to have a downtime once every few months. And for that day, for example, just recently on the weekend, our email was out for almost 8 hours. But that just cannot be the case when you are offering a service like this in Amazon or any IBM or the Microsoft Azure. Those are all 24/7. So in many ways, it's actually more secure and safer that way. But that's really not what you're talking about. What you're talking about is actually this notion of sort of traceability, or for that matter, compliance, things like that. In a social network like this, it's really no different from email anyway. Every piece of email is discoverable these days, anyhow. So all you're changing is moving from your email inbox to a shared space. Now, frankly, data is data. There's no difference. However, I think the better answer for your question, I personally believe it, is actually better transparency kills all the ills. Had Enron had this kind of network, and the whistleblower can, at the first instance, really make the whole world aware. In fact, the fact that there is a transparency there, Enron would never even have happened. Okay, give you a very simple example. So, talking about, again, my own company. We're small, but we're very, very spread out. Okay, to give you some key kind of attributes. We're in 20 different countries. 40% of our employees work from home. Okay, especially in the smaller market, they're just alone, 1 or 2 people there. So people travel around a lot. And the company went through a big sort of change in the past. We had to right-size ourselves and things like that. So we actually realized there was actually a lot of abuse, especially in T&E. People travel and often throw a couple more days into that and go to see their mother, and we pay for that. Okay. Now we never really catch that. It's very, very hard, right? And often we find out when the employees already decided to leave the company, hand us this big pile of bills to pay. And by law, you have to pay for that. Too late to catch that, even though we find out in the end. So finally, I realized there's a very simple solution to this, which is we call the blue sky policy. Nowadays, at BroadVision, if you want to do travel, you have to file a pre-approval. And that, by the way, is in the public, open community. Okay. So every piece of travel now is in the public, out in the open. Okay. Anybody can see that. Even though the actual approval is private between you using our workflow, we call task flow, between you and your manager. But the information itself, both pre and post, will be public. So that's a big deterrent. Because even if your manager doesn't look at it carefully, your CEO doesn't look at it carefully, somebody would. And indeed, somebody does look at it. All right? So we have a policy, for example, each meal couldn't be more than $50. Some people spend $75 constantly. And it was caught. How come you can spend $75 and we cannot? Things like that. And that's a peanut case, of course, compared to the Enron, right? But transparency, openness leads to transparency. And transparency kills a lot of abuses. Very simple. And it's not even hard to implement. Extremely easy to do. So we do a lot of our workflow and policy this way. Okay. The thing can be open, let it open. Okay, don't worry about it. In fact, a lot of people worry about people saying kind of bad things or abusive things. Never happened. Why? Because when you are standing on a soapbox now, even better than in email, you have to be extremely judicious in what you say. Okay. So, in an environment like this, everybody is actually a great citizen. Okay, because you gain reputation. I think Andy Grove says the biggest manager at Intel is not my big VPs or all these. It's my knowledge managers. These are non-executive people. They're simply everybody go-to as a go-to person. It's a brain trust of the company. People that doesn't have to manage 100 people. They manage nobody. But these are the real managers, the leader of the company. And that's really what this will promote. Okay. Number one. So number two question, I think it's about this question, right? I mean, can you just maybe repeat quickly? Oh, the timeliness. Yeah. So I think the beauty about that is that in the email case, since it's a designated team of sort of need to know, then if you're not responding, you're really like our kids. You're creating a lot of anxiety or sometimes even problematic. But in a river approach, where it's pooling, that everybody can see what's going on, you actually are basically, I think, you get more people to be able to answer the same question than before. So I think the reason that therefore you can get more immediacy is simply because there are more people following the same issue than the few that you know may need to know. Okay, so need to share becomes a lot of what's the right word? Sort of backups to solving the issue. And probably more important than back to the word serendipity is you don't know what you don't know. But if those people are there watching this, you get their help almost by accident. And that's really another big beauty of this style of knowledge management than the traditional push-based approach. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. First of all, it's important to know that done right, like we try to do, a business or enterprise social network in the cloud doesn't mean it's anarchy. Okay. It means is that there are more regulated or guided sharing. So in our legal department, for instance, they are able to set up lots and lots of different types of communities. So maybe one type of community are the most confidential stuff, M&A, for example, that only a few of us can be member of. Okay. Other things, everyday stuff, you have to go through a laborious process of approval and this and that. Most important thing, I think, is the simplest thing. It's amazing. Is remember in email, and I'm the biggest culprit of it, is that, when we do press releases or especially earnings, I lie every time. When I tell Erin, I said, this is my final version now. 2 minutes later, she will receive another version from me saying, so it's a final, and final, and final, right? Because, just if I read it again, I'll find a few words to change again. So that's a lot about legal, is that, changes happen, a lot. And when you send email to 5 people or 10 people or whatever, the more, the worse the problem becomes. You are constantly chasing for something you don't know whether it's really the answer or not, or the final or not. And therefore, to try to unravel that becomes extremely time-consuming. I think the biggest drain on our economy right now is all the hidden costs that we spend in our email. I actually would like to commission a study to really study that, how much cost is wasted. And we don't really account for it at all. Kind of in front of email, sort of like granted, we don't even count, how much time you're spending. But I think for knowledge workers, we're burning a lot of time doing something completely unnecessary. So in this case, is that first of all, they get all their stuff into the network, they put it in the right place. And just by keeping all the up-to-date stuff there, allowing our field salespeople to really get to it by themselves. And we don't have a big legal department, really already, for them is a huge, huge productivity gain. We have another case, which is a bank. The biggest proponent also happens to be the legal department in terms of use case. Why? Because the bank every Monday has to issue used to be sort of a newsletter type of thing to all employees, all the different branches, telling them about what's new. A lot of pronouncements would have happened in the prior week. This change, that change, new issues, blah, blah, blah. and that could be on security laws or banking, blah, blah, all different types of things. And what they say is that in the past they never know whether people really read it or understand that or not. And very few people wanted to ask questions because they, like I said earlier, they would be deemed as kind of either kind of stupid or repetitive or whatever the reason. Nowadays, they again put it in communities. It's any question would have, it needs to be asked, would have a way to ask. Then you can just add to that or say, hey, here's my understanding of it. What do you think? Blah blah blah. And then everybody who's actually even downloaded it, we have a complete audit trail whether you've done that or not. Okay, so it's just a far better way of doing things this way than this sort of senseless chase of these threats, so to speak. Okay. Is that they think they get it, but they really don't. Believe me, changing people's behavior is extremely hard, extremely hard. And that's talking about one person. If you need to change the whole organization, it's even a lot harder, as you can tell, right? But once you get it, once you cross over that famous chasm, you then realize, I mean, you can take away my email now. You can take away my email, you can take away my laptop. You cannot take away my iPad now, and you cannot take away my Clearville. Because that's the way, everywhere in Narita Airport, I open it up, I can approve, this, hire that. I mean, it's fantastic. Everything is in one place. I don't have to chase anything anymore. Okay. So, which is why we think it doesn't help to watch the Jane Fonda exercise tape. You have to go do it yourself, right? And too many people are watching. And they think they get it, but they really don't. Okay. But the funny thing is, it really isn't that hard. I mean, it's very human nature to work like this. It's just that we've been programmed for too long, 30 years, to use one single tool to do all our work called email. Right? And email is a very divergent thing before it would converge. And who knows how long normally that takes. It's actually a fairly long time. A hidden economy, a hidden cost of running a business. For our own network, internal network, not only is our board directors full members, we also open it up to our outside counsel and all our auditors. Complete free pass to go anywhere and look at anything. Our auditors love it. Okay, don't need any whistleblowers. Everything is there. Okay. Shareholders, different story. I believe that you need a different network, not your internal network, because after all, there's still really a lot of things that's confidential, right? Future product strategy, blah, 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 blah. And if some people have access to it and some people don't, of course, it creates a lot of problems. So I think for shareholders, answer is yes, but it's probably a different network, a different type of information that could help them make their own decision, but not like this free-for-all, this everything type of environment. Yes. The answer is reputation economy. The system will take care of itself. In other words, those chatter, noise generators, basically very quickly be relegated to something irrelevant. People don't pay attention to them anymore. Okay? the system will take care of itself. It's amazing how an ecosystem, if you give them the healthy kind of setup, pretty much can thrive. But if you've done wrong, for example, if you don't really try to get the right mandate and right group of people to get this ecosystem with a healthy start, many places we see that they very quickly kind of degenerate into basically a chatter place, a place where people are just talking about restaurants and football game yesterday. I mean, do that in Facebook. Don't do it in my company network. This is about work. And so to answer your question, if you can kind of set it in the right foot, in the right direction, the reputation would take care of itself. You will see the people kind of becoming the leaders, and generally they are. They say things people really believe in or give them credit for, etc., etc. However, there is a cultural adjustment that we, the leadership position, need to make, which is to be willing to accept that what you dictate in the past is no longer always the most effective way of doing things. You have to hold yourself back. And I'm very good now. At the beginning, I say, what the hell is this guy talking like this? Because you are just one of them. It's very different from email. Email, you hold the ultimate power. You basically got directing traffic. You say, But here, in many cases, I mean, I still have my own blog area so that I don't mingle with the other. We have a place called Soapbox. Maybe I can put anything there that they want to say. I don't mingle with that. I have my own little. CEO has his own privileges, just very little. But other than that, every place, almost every place, you are just one of the guys. You are one opinion amongst hundreds of other possible contributors. And for a lot of people, that's a big adjustment. You have to live in a way that the best example that I want to give is the example that in Charlene Lee's book talks about open culture is the U.S. Navy. And she gives an example because they invited a bunch of these social experts to USS Enterprise, where they find there's a complete open communication through blogs and WeChat, all these tools, social tools, on aircraft carrier of 5,000 people. But it does not change anything of how they do their command and control. Nothing can go wrong in a big operation like that, and yet it's fairly open in other things. Like, for instance, how should we organize the Christmas party? Okay, and lots of very open communication. But that doesn't have to conflict with how you run your business in a more command and control sort of traditional manner at all. I think the two can live in a perfect harmony if done right. And so much more then can come out of this through the n squared effect. Yes, sir? Yes. Yes, that's already happening in many ways. Some people call that social CRM. With the traditional CRM, mainly more about just processing the data about your customer. Social CRM is about dealing with the customer, interact with them directly. In many ways, let the customer sort of crowdsource to them or each other. But to answer the first part of your question also is that it goes beyond just your own employees into company and company as well. So it's both B2E and B2B and B2C, all connected into an ecosystem. In fact, there could be a network, many networks of networks where all this can then become part of a very healthy sort of galaxy, so to speak. So in many ways, think of this as kind of a congruence of Facebook and LinkedIn. We're all familiar with LinkedIn, where it's more business or professional connection, and Facebook is more of sort of a friendship connection. But if you kind of combine the two concepts and put a company around it, that's really what we think, I believe, the sort of ultimate goal should be for business social networking. Yes, there's many examples of sort of just based on their needs. Maybe it's a lab of very, very high-powered researchers really needing to work across borders or with their partners, being the sort of spearhead of this and ultimately then spread across more within the organization. One beauty about a system like Clearview is it's very viral. So you can invite. First of all, you can say, nobody can join unless they have my company's domain name. So we offer a lot more protection. Because in Facebook, you can't do this in Facebook. Why? Because you cannot prevent anybody from invite some random other wrong people. Here, it's designed for the enterprise. Therefore, you can say, can only have these type of domain names, or cannot have any of those domain names, whatever you want to do. But from there, you can basically let it grow by itself, because it's very based on DIY, meaning do it yourself, rather than IT having to be involved in, kind of controlling or thereby generating a lot more cost or time to getting this going. Yes, sir. I don't remember who said this, but to me, personally, I believe that when you begin to really believe in your own propaganda, is the beginning of your demise. And that's the biggest mistake that leaders often make. Okay? They always say that, when you are at the greatest is really when it's the beginning of the fall, right? So this notion of this sort of being forever driving for doing better, this whole notion of paranoia that your competition is always behind you, or you can never be the best unless you try harder, is really key. And how do we really, really kind of have that kind of culture as built into your DNA? I believe an open environment like this is the key to that. That you have the ability to see a lot of different perspectives you were otherwise be able to know. Okay, and a lot of that, once you integrate this with social media from outside, then you will be able to also monitor what your customers are saying. Then you realize, hey, maybe there's a new innovation already happening. Let's say I'm in the potato chip business, for example. Okay, suddenly you see a lot of it talking about, I don't know, different type of things for potato chips or whatever. Sometimes we saw all the innovation. Maybe it's the shape of it, or maybe it's more healthier type of products, whatever. You tend to be able to respond to things faster. And that's what I think about, is that whole notion of flow creating velocity. And therefore, you can really then compete a lot faster, a lot better. That you would not, therefore, as a result, be too complacent and sitting on your laurels, like most people
More
do.
than enough, they will keep you all night long. One of the things about a great leader is that they don't know when to stop. So we're going to give Dr. Chen a hand. Thank you so very, very much.